I'm lucky because I got to meet Jad Ghosn 6 months ago when I was a guest on his podcast. If you haven't already, please check it out because it really is one of my favorite, if not my favorite, experience when it comes to discussing this country's good and bad parts of its history. Jad is talented. He's ethical, he's skilled, and he's rightfully earned his place as a celebrated Lebanese journalist. So, if you have a moment, check it out if you haven't already. And please hit the subscribe button to this channel, click on the like button, leave a comment. Any engagement is appreciated. The audio listenership is quite big, but the video viewers, it's not that big. So I'd like to keep it growing. And that requires some engagement from the audience. So, if you can, share this channel with your friends and family, punish them with my voice and my face. So, without further ado, Jad Ghosn. Transition from mostly Jadeed to your own independent platform.
Yeah.
And you're succeeding.
Thank you.
But in a time where many people find it difficult to even make ends meet, you found a way to make your own terms sustainable. There's no compromise. In our brief discussions, you're generating revenue really thanks to donations and thanks to what we all live off of, which is YouTube ad revenue.
Which is not very...
It's not enough, but if you combine it, there's a way to live off of what you love doing, and you found a way to do it. And I'm not going to bother you with the subject many people bothered you with, but I'd like to just sort of pick up a bit from that moment where you were about to travel, and then you got news that your job was, I think, suspended or terminated?
Yeah, it was terminated at the end.
Terminated.
Yeah.
So without getting, I don't want to
intrude
on that.
No problem. No,
okay.
It's not an issue.
But let's start from that point where you get that message to where you are now. Are there any regrets?
Not at all, because look, it was a really uncertain period that I was going through. Before that, since at least the 4th of August explosion, because it has been for me about 2 to 3 years that I was, let's term it as bored a little bit by working at Al Jadeed, because I had the feeling that I did all that I can do within this framework. It's now repetitive a little bit.
Yeah.
And Lebanese politics in general is repetitive. So we had the 17th of October movement.
Which you were part of.
That picks you up from a motivational standpoint, and then you have something to work for. But then during the mid 2020, you had that feeling of going back into the same loophole that we had before, after the Hassan Diab government, and then the stalemate that we got into. And then the explosion happened. So for about 3 to 4 years, I was having the idea, I was contemplating the idea of maybe leaving the country or staying here. I wasn't sure.
So it was already in your mind before you made that final decision that you wanted to...
but I always came to the conclusion, no, that I'll stay here. Because it's fine still for me.
Yeah.
I can have something to do here. I'm interested in Lebanese politics and trying to affect anything in this country. But at the same time, it's because of my parents. They are in Lebanon, and someone has to help there, because my sister is already in France, and my brother is also on his pathway going to Paris. So
Ghadi,
that you know.
Yeah. So I wanted to, I'm going to insert this in. It shows you just how small Beirut is. It was not long after our conversation on your podcast. He introduced himself as your brother.
Oh, really?
In Jemaize. Mushmush Hotel.
I see.
And next to the guy who does Art of Boo, Bernard, forgot his
Yeah,
last
yeah,
name. Bernard, I should remember this.
Yeah, and I remember. I forgot his last name also.
Art of Boo.
Art of Boo. Yeah.
They're sitting next to each other, and I'm like, oh, this is where it all happens, you know? And your episode that you released today was with Ghassan Mkhayber, if I'm not mistaken. I saw him on Tuesday. We were talking about media and journalism. It just shows you how small this country is.
Yeah, and that's one of our political problems that we don't look into much.
Yeah.
Having a small country affects political relations in society. So it makes change harder.
Yeah.
Because you have the term that Ibn Khaldun uses, I don't know the exact translation into English, al-asabiyya.
Yeah.
Al-asabiyya. It usually changes a little bit or evolves a little bit in cities. So when you live in a village, let's say, so you have your family ties and you have your value system, which is quite rigid a little bit, and you have a big brother always. So everyone is watching everyone.
Yeah.
When you go down into cities, they're more crowded, and no one knows really the other that much, and no one really watches the other and have judgments all the time.
Right.
So that's why cities usually temper down the old asabiyya.
Right.
So in Lebanon we have a small country. Everybody knows everyone.
Even in the city, we still know each other.
Even in the city.
Yeah.
So when you get into a certain political party, I had that when I was in FPM before 2012, and you want to leave that party because you just change your opinions or you have anything change in the way you see things.
You called it a wit.
So the problem becomes not really from an idea standpoint. You can change your opinion and you can see that something is wrong here, or I don't agree with a lot of stuff going on. The problem is with your social status.
Yeah.
Because when you are in a political party in Lebanon, you are in a network.
Right.
So leaving that one network makes you seem as if now you're alone. So because I had this discussion with a friend and he told me back then that, okay, now you're leaving FPM. What have you become now? I told him I haven't become anything. I'm just me. Yeah. So you're nothing?
Right.
So the word nothing really rang in my ear, because that's how the true feeling is. If you're not in a given traditional political party in Lebanon, you're nothing.
But this is, I'm really happy. You've done two things right now. You've done what you're very good at, which is took the conversation to a place that is so rewarding and rich.
Thank you.
And you also prove, and I know this having met you before and having followed your work for some time, you are your own person. I know that you've come to your own conclusions yourself. And that's why it's a sincere debate sometimes. And that's the debate you can have with someone who's not...
That's the word. Having sincere debates.
Yeah, I think
having no hidden agendas or trying to serve a hidden agenda.
Right, and the fact is you are not nothing. You are something, and that's worth a lot. But let's go back to the moment you said, screw the Gulf, I'm staying in Lebanon on my terms.
Because when I had the offer from Bloomberg, Asharq, I had this question because many friends also always ask me, how come you go to the Saudi and I'm opposed to the Saudi regime as a whole. I said, yes, it's a compromise. I know it's a compromise. But I tried to manage this compromise while negotiating with Asharq. So that's why I told them that I don't want to be in the political section. I want to be in the economic section that deals with stuff. And I know that you have your own framework, let's say, but don't be asking me to have doing praises to any official in Saudi Arabia.
So you wanted to limit it. It's not limited, but you wanted to be in
economics. That's a compromise, and I know that's a compromise.
Yeah.
So
you did not want to go in the politics stuff.
Because I knew beforehand that I would have to have some clashes that won't get you anywhere. In any TV station that is related to any official in Saudi Arabia or any other Arab country in general, but especially Saudi Arabia. So That's a compromise, and that's not an easy compromise. And I had to do it because I was thinking about my parents and how one can sustain his living in a country like Lebanon. But and I took my time to think if I was going to go there in the first place or not, because it wasn't the ideal place for me to be, but I needed that as a transitional phase, going then afterwards, in my mind at least, somewhere else in Europe, but that would be later on through immigration. I'm not going back.
So that was like
so it was an ideal transitional period for me to figure out what I'm going to do. Are you going back to Lebanon or not?
Yeah.
And one of the ideas that I had, because I was really reluctant in going there, because of my personal views of what is true media and what is a really best place to work in any realm related to politics. What are the best conditions? And those weren't the best conditions.
For those specific reasons.
Yeah. So a friend told me at the time that, okay, Joseph Smeha at the time, the late Joseph Smeha, held also bad views about Saudi Arabia and the Gulf and the regimes there. But he worked for a bit at Al Hayat, which is Saudi-owned newspaper, because of the financial reason, not anything else. And the discussion with him back then was that, yes, it's not the ideal place to be, but I have to earn a living, I have a family, and I have to do something. And one has to say that the Lebanese media outlets in general, be it newspaper in his case, or TV stations in mine, are also not the ideal place. You are also doing compromises here. But definitely it goes without saying that you have a bigger margin here to work in.
Yeah.
True journalism is a daily negotiation between the journalist and his institution that he works in, because you're never almost on the same page.
Yeah.
So you would have to work in a margin that you will try to forge through negotiations with your TV station, and your stature in your TV station gets higher, and you would have more margin to work within the more you are needed by the TV station. So if you are just any other reporter, no, you don't have a bigger margin, and I saw that. So me, Riyad Abaisi, Ramil Amin, lots of other fellows, we had some margin to work with, and Al Jadeed didn't have any problem with that, even though we worked on the same page, especially after the 17th of October revolution. So I was very critical of the central bank, of its governor, of the association of banks. They weren't on the same page, at least not at that level.
Did they ever, was there ever a moment where you had to actually
censor myself?
Or, it doesn't have to be that dramatic. It's just a word or two that has to be touched on and maybe played with a bit.
Not really. I said the story many times because during my 8 years minus a couple of months at Al Jadeed, I had once a request to change something in my report. It was about the banks. It was in, I believe, 2015.
Okay,
so it was before the collapse. It was just a report about the Bank of Beirut, if I remember, having a Christmas tree in Kirki.
Okay.
So they had their Christmas tree with some sort of small ATM like poster written on Bank of Beirut. So I remember the story of Jesus Christ getting into the temple and having his problems with such people, and saying that you cannot turn this holy place into somewhere where you can do some finances. So it was it was a picture that triggered me. So I did a report on it, and I named the bank and said that quote from the Bible in opposition to what happened there. So they had a problem with that because Bank of Beirut is they have their commercials on New TV, so they put their ads there.
Oh, so that was the problem. It was more advertising than
advertising. Yes.
Okay.
So, but during the revolution, we had discussions about more coverage to the demonstration being held at the central bank, they did some coverage, but I was calling for more coverage there. Not only me, several of my colleagues, Ramiz, Adi, Riyad, Adam Shamsuddin, and others. Their argument that was that if you don't have more than 100 or 150 protesters, we cannot just put them on air all the time.
Yeah.
Our argument was that if you put the cameras there, people would, the numbers would grow.
Yeah.
So the media has a role. Such stuff. But during that period, I was going on TV with Joe Salibi, mainly on a regular basis, on a nightly basis at the first couple of days. And I was very critical to Riyad Salami and the banking sector. And they didn't talk to me about that.
Okay, so it was more these are sponsors for, this is money, a bank is advertising, cool it on them.
Yeah, so they told me you can put that report back then,
right,
but you cannot name the bank and just try to put it on a blurry picture of their logo and stuff like that.
But in the Lebanese context, that's actually not bad, because that shows that I'm getting from you that for the most part, you had your own independent outlet. You were able to do it on your terms.
To be frank, I did. Yeah. I didn't.
And for the sound effects, you came on the night of the storm, which is even a bigger honor for me.
That's cozy.
Cozy. And what did you say before? If we both die, great for viewers.
You will see something special.
Ad revenue goes up.
To our relatives, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
So I wasn't, in many instances, at the same page politically with Jadeed. So when I first got into Jadeed, I was opposed to that muqaddima. They had the introduction to the nightly bulletin.
Yes.
But then I changed my mind. Because yes, it's not the most professional way to broadcast your news. But in the Lebanese context, what it gave us as journalists working at Jadeed, so it's okay. You put your own opinion, the opinion of the TV station, in that introduction, and you spare us from any issues politically related to that stance that you have.
Right.
So if you watched Al Jadeed News, you would have, politically speaking, many divergent views in the nightly bulletin.
Yeah,
and true. That would become clear back in 2013, 14, 15, in the coverage of the Syrian crisis.
Yes, right.
Because then you would have some reporters calling the Syrian army, let's say, Al-Jaysh al-Arabi al-Suri. It's the regime's army.
Yes.
And you would say the next night, another reporter saying, Quwat al-Assad.
Right.
So, yes, the reporters have different views, and the TV station just allowed that. Because they have their own political stance, let's say, at the beginning of the nightly news.
And they let you take it from there.
Yep.
But then it becomes almost, this is your opinion, but it's not Al-Jadeed's opinion.
It's a blurry, it's a gray area, but they supported that. They didn't have any problem with that.
So it's a blurred way of describing maybe your input and Al-Jadeed's input at the same time. That they have the way of saying, this is your opinion, that's another journalist's opinion. It's our station, but you have your autonomy. Yeah. Not full independence, but autonomy.
And I have to be clear here, I'm talking about my own personal experience.
Yeah, sure.
And I know it differs from journalist to the other. So for me to go back to the Bloomberg Asharq issue, I was giving this whole long example about the compromise you need to do as a journalist in Lebanon, or if you work in Saudi Arabia, knowing that in Saudi Arabia or maybe any other Arab country, depends on its political system there, you would have a smaller margin. And it was a big compromise that I had to do for financial reasons.
Yeah.
I tried to have like an immunity system for me, going to the economic side of the issue, knowing that in economy it's not a whole scientific issue. You have many divergent opinions in economy and it's political. Yeah. But there you can handle it with the technicalities of economy. You can have your own margin figured out that way. But nevertheless, this whole reasoning that I had, they made my job easier by just telling me while I'm still in Lebanon that you would never have any margin there. Because
even in economics.
Yeah, no. When we spoke, they told me yes, we are an independent media. You can say whatever you want. Yeah. And they told me if you review what Bloomberg spoke about Saudi Arabia during the Khashoggi assassination, we spoke with high criticism to Saudi Arabia, so you don't have any problem there.
Okay.
So they knew my opinion about Saudi Arabia. It wasn't like something I had them on Twitter.
Yeah.
So it's not a private
Wasn't like
domain.
They had to dive deep to find it. Yeah.
So what happened later on is the whole political issue around some political, let's say, small battles in Saudi Arabia with the new team around MBS. They are trying to سعودة الإعلام السعودي. So they are trying to, I don't know how to say it, Saudiize.
Yeah. So, wow. Yeah. I guess so.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So because they are being critical about with the foreigners that came and took control of their media outlets, and it was more a battle towards Al-Khatib, who was a Jordanian Palestinian who was running Bloomberg Al-Sharq, who was before in Al-Arabiya and Al-Hadath. So they are telling these foreigners are bringing employees who are critical of Saudi Arabia, while us Saudis need that kind of jobs.
And you were kind of caught in there.
It's just used as an arsenal.
Right.
For their fights, it's fine.
Yeah.
Now looking back at it, it spared me from a clash, because if that was the internal structure there, it would have been a matter of weeks before we had any clash.
I think you would have resigned.
I believe so. I cannot be certain because you won't know the internal dynamics at Bloomberg Al-Sharq. I don't want to be critical of something that I don't know. Maybe they have their own internal issues that they can deal with. But knowing that I had my opinions declared and public about Saudi Arabia, and they can't handle it, spared me the travel, and maybe spared me some troubles there, because you would have to have your home, I would have to have the rent paid on a year, and you might leave the country 3 weeks later. That would have been brutal a little bit.
What confuses me, even though you went through the whole process, you know it better than anyone, obviously, but what still confuses me is that they don't see having you as a strength, because it's to anyone's advantage to have somebody who's opinionated but is not willing to be bought. And that's something that I think it's a shame that they're not willing to incorporate more.
So what intrigued me at the first place when they spoke to me that they want someone like me, so they know who I am, they know what I say, is that. So I thought that having Bloomberg there, maybe with Al-Sharq, they are trying to have some credibility ingrained while just having this TV station, by having someone critical of the political regime in Saudi Arabia, not the Saudis. And I believe personally that my criticism of the political regime in Saudi Arabia is a defense to the Saudi people. I don't have anything to lose here having any oppressive regime in Saudi Arabia or Syria or whatever. So I'm not affected by the Saudis here in Lebanon. But that wasn't the stance. So now looking back, that what propelled me into taking the risk in launching my own podcast. Because then Jadeed spoke to me to come back to Jadeed, but I said it has been 2 years that I'm having these thoughts of leaving Jadeed and not daring to do so, saying it's not the right time, economically speaking. So it's like a tape that you have to just remove. And I did that. It wasn't clear at the beginning what kind of revenues that I would have from such an outlet. Would it be enough for me to sustain a living? And it was great ending to a whole messy period.
It feels good to feel great at the end. I think that's all the bumps, and then you get to that point where you can look back and say, best decision you made was not to go. I think that's I think all the more reason for people that care about what you're doing or care about what any independent outlet is doing is to actually support them. And it kind of, it's humbling sometimes to see whether it's Megaphone that was asking for a regular contribution recently, or any podcast that sort of puts on Patreon and says it's needed because you can't really survive without the audience helping. And you get great content in return, which I think is a nice way to introduce a subject both of us faced. It's kind of funny in a way. It's entertaining. Somebody I don't know, but I know from social media, many common friends. You may know him as well, Mustafa Hamwe.
Yeah, I know him from social media.
I don't think I've ever met him. I think he may be in Ghana.
Really? He's not in
I
Lebanon.
don't think so. He posted a funny, it was like a back and forth. He said, here are the two podcasts that he enjoys, probably from Ghana. You interviewing Mary Claude Najm.
Yeah.
Same week, maybe within a few days, I spoke to Sami Jmeir.
Yeah.
And he posted, or there was a post of us, sort of Sami Jmeir and myself and yourself with Mary Claude Najm, and saying the independent podcasts are speaking to the regime or something like that. He wasn't necessarily criticizing, more that.
But I hear I'm not talking about the specific tweet from Hamwi, but I heard lots of, even during the days I was at Jadeed, this kind of argument that you don't have to invite speakers related to the regime.
Right.
And I don't understand that logic.
Yeah. So yes, that was the other end. You don't.
No. In a perfect world, I would love to have an interview with Fuad Senora.
Okay. Yeah.
Because
let me write that down. My next guest. How do you spell his last name?
So because I vehemently disagree with lots of his doings, but at least I know that he knows what he's doing. He's not just a side player in the political system.
Yeah.
So let's talk seriously. Because most of our MPs, not all of them, but most of our MPs in the Lebanese parliament are just there for the ride. They have nothing to discuss really.
Yeah.
They just want that social status of being named an MP.
You're right. I think even most ministers too.
And lots of ministers, yeah. There are key people that you might agree or disagree with, but you can have a real conversation with. So if I only talk with those who I'm agreeing with, like preaching to a choir, it's boring, it's redundant, and in a certain way, you would be repeating the experience of partisan media outlets in Lebanon, like Al Manar or OTV or Mustaqbal or MBN.
Yeah.
They just talk to each other, and it's not ununderstandable when you see the ratings that LBC, Al Jadeed, MTV have higher ratings in terms of viewership than those other media outlets, because even those with Hezbollah don't watch Al Manar. They watch maybe Al Jadeed more.
Sure. Or even MTV.
Or even MTV or LBC. Yeah. Because in terms of any discussion to be interesting, if you know what the person is going to say, why I'm watching this whole episode. So the diversification of guests is essential. But I tried to begin during these 35 episodes now, having more emphasis on the figures from the opposition or from the alternative political parties, because they don't have the means or they don't have the opportunity on the traditional media. But on the on the longer term, I would love to have interviews with any political figure in Lebanon. The issue is, what are we going to talk about? That's how you judge.
This is where I'll try to. It's interesting. There's no friction yet. We need to create some friction. How do we do it? Let me throw some. Let me put some
red meat.
Let's put some red meat. Or I was going to say, let's plug in the laptop to the kahraba and see what happens during the lightning storm. I watch your podcast. I listen to your podcast more than any other podcast. I got to know your work better in recent months, and I listen all the time. I'll be quite honest, there are some guests that make me uncomfortable. And I think they probably make you uncomfortable too. Maybe, or maybe not. I shouldn't assume. But so let's look at the spectrum. You've included an idiot like me.
I don't agree.
It's dim the lights, put the filter. So you had someone like me who's, I think, probably, after that episode, it's pretty clear where I stand on one issue at least. But you're willing to talk about something. It's very controversial and very emotional subject in this country. You will also have somebody like Brahim Al-Amin from Akhbar, and you can have the same engaging tone, the same curiosity, and the same depth. And for me, that is professional.
But because I'm truly curious to understand the whole argumentation behind any political stance. But that's what I was trying to say, like choosing the guests. You need people who really are involved, or they really believe in what they are saying.
Yeah.
Because I follow most of the political talk shows on the traditional media.
Yeah.
You'd have some MPs, lots of them that I know personally, behind the cameras that they tell you that they don't believe everything that they are saying.
Oh, yeah.
So in, let's say, Ibrahim Al-Amin's interview, my whole argument was that, okay, you are a pro-Hezbollah, you have a pro-Hezbollah political view. That's fine. But let's talk how Hezbollah is affecting state building in Lebanon.
Yeah.
Okay, let's put aside his role as a resistance. I don't have any problem with that for the moment. But the resistance is a means to an end. The end is having a better country, a stronger country, a more flourishing country. That's why I also am in favor of a strong state that can defend its territory and sovereignty.
Yeah.
So if you're doing that job, how come Hezbollah on the internal issues is not doing any real job in terms of fighting corruption? But on the other hand, they are voting for Mi'ati and for another national coalition government that we all know beforehand that it will fail, and they will lay the blame on each other. Yeah. So that movie we've seen lots of times.
And I think you have the credentials to ask someone like him that question, because I think that person also knows that this is not a scoop. It's not trying to. You're actually
truly. So he had an answer. At least he has his own complete reasoning. You can agree with or disagree with. So what he replied with, yes, I agree. They are not doing their job on the internal side, and that's why I told them. He's talking now. You should refrain from doing internal politics. You're a resistant movement. Get out of the government. It's not your job. You're failing at that. Okay. That's an answer. But trying to defend Mi'ati's government or their persistent alliance with all of the other confessions from 2005 till now, definitely with some ups and downs, and saying that we are just not, we don't have anything related to the Lebanese government. We're just that's counters the facts.
Yeah.
So he didn't go that way. He answered the question, and he has his own reasoning. That's what I consider a good conversation.
It's riveting, and the reason I think for many people that I know that watch you and don't necessarily agree with a lot of what these guests are saying, but they're able to hear from them what they have to say. It's exceptional. And I think
I'll ask you for an advice now.
Sure. No, but he's probably the farthest down on the spectrum that I could imagine, because there's many people on the way there that I find almost at times entertaining. From TV, Najah Hakim used to be my popcorn. I would sort of enjoy the moments that he would get a bit sort of frantic and energized. He was very calm and very toned and measured when he spoke to you. I think you found a way to
No, when you I'm trying to figure out that side of how to do interviews, because even during my period at the Jadeed, I rarely did long interviews. So it was mostly documentaries or news reports. So when you talk with people, when you ask people to reflect on their own experience, especially if you go back to their earliest experiences, they can go into this reflective mode.
Yes.
And it almost always is toned down.
That's a good point. Because I've never, from the episodes I've listened to, I've never heard anyone lose their temper.
Because I'm not trying to trigger that.
I
know one can easily, in a very cheesy way, trigger some points.
Sure.
I can tell Najah Hakim that yes, X said that you are an old-fashioned politician filled with disappointments. Don't throw your disappointments on us.
Right.
There are people who say that.
Yeah.
What's the point? I can say that.
Yeah.
What am I adding to the general discussion?
Yeah.
Nothing. But
Yeah.
yes, I know it might be a good clickbait way to just have small clips where, but that's not what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
I know that lots of the guests that I'm choosing are not those who can bring like 300,000 viewers. I know that.
But it's the, let's say, 30 to 50 or whatever thousand views that count.
Yeah.
It's the ones that want to learn.
It's the discussion that interests me. I'm not trying to do anything.
Absolutely. I've watched Dan Ezzi talk on every outlet, yet the only time I enjoyed the exchange was with you. It was at a hotel lobby, I believe.
No, what happened is a funny story because I was beginning my interviews. I had Lies Seba, I had Fouad Strabelsi, and Dan Ezzi was the third.
Okay.
It was during the, maybe a week before I did the interview. I was trying to stop smoking at the time. So I went to a friend that has a cigar place.
There they are.
I'm trying.
And failing miserably.
Since April, so I'm now still trying. Yeah, I did IQOS, I did those. So at the time, I knew a friend that has a cigar lounge. It's a cigar shop.
Okay.
So I used to buy the cigarellos and
Yes.
stuff like that, trying not to smoke and just to puff them without
Yeah.
inhaling and stuff like that. So I was talking with him, and it's been a while since I saw him because I was smoking before.
Right.
So I was there and I was talking with the guy that owns the shop,
Yeah.
and he was telling me that last week he saw Dan Azzi. He came to him
Uh-huh.
because he buys also cigars and stuff. Oh, you know Dan Azzi and stuff like that. Yes, he always comes and he works there. So I called Dan when I was at Fidel's. He was telling me that you know him. Yeah. So during the conversation, I said that let's do an interview here.
Oh, great.
Because you smoke cigars. Let's do it here.
Right.
Yeah. So I was I'm a customer, so I'll come. So
And they let you do it, which is nice.
Yeah,
And they
which
gave
is
you
nice.
Yeah.
So ideally, in an ideal world, I would love to have most of my interviews in that setup, not that specific setup, but in a more unofficial sit down.
It's nice having some motion in the background and having it, even the background itself is pleasant to look at and it looks very comfortable. Maybe it's a little eccentric with the cigars, but still it adds flavor to the episode.
Because it wasn't like forced to say.
Yeah, right.
He smokes cigars. He usually does that, so we did it. So it's not like trying to have something unreal. Just to stage something.
But so Dan Ezzi speaks for a living. I mean, he has a real job, obviously, but he talks a lot, and he talks well. But you found a way to, I think, probe him like a podcaster should. I enjoyed it. Fouad Strabelsi, who we both know from AUB, I remembered why I used to read his books to begin with, that this is a very important contributor to Lebanese history on the more economic side, but still very, very important. And then there's sort of characters along the way. Najah Wakim is one of them. George Urim. It's the first time I actually watched him talk.
Really?
And it was, for me, somebody who wants to learn about him, wants to learn about maybe his stories. I think that's the only way to do it. So all of that is my way of asking you. I know you're not doing it for attention, obviously. You're not doing it for clickbait. You're willing to go to somebody who's fairly controversial, at least in the journalism world. Forget politics. I think even in journalism, Brahim Al-Amin, the name, when it's brought up, it does sort of have there's controversy there. I spoke to Sami Jmail. Before the protests, I spoke to Ray Al-Hassan when she was Minister of Interior. I spoke to Amal Mdalali, the UN ambassador to the UN. Tariq Mitri, who's a former minister.
You had Mr. Hoff.
I had Fred Hoff. Mr. Hoff, yes.
Hoffline.
The Hoffline was on the episode, on the podcast. The Tariq Mitri, a former minister. Nasser Yassin, who's a current minister. And other names that have been either in positions of power or are seeking positions of power. Many of them, I think, wanted to be in the Hassan Diab government. And I think that's why they were talking to me. I don't know, maybe. But I don't see any shame in speaking to people that have been completely sidelined by a certain crowd within October 17. I think there's a Puritan, that's not the right word. There's an absolutist.
It's a close enough word.
Yeah, there's something about it's shameful to talk to Sami Ismail. I don't think so. I had no problem speaking with him about the things that I wanted to talk about, and we had that back and forth. Nothing was cut out. It was word for word. We spoke about even things like Sabra Shatila.
Yeah,
which, I mean, maybe it's not enough. It should have been 5 hours long.
Yeah.
Maybe it requires a series. But I don't see any problem in talking to somebody like that. And I find it a bit odd that this can be even controversial. And on the flip side, so what if you're talking to Mary Claude Neja? She's a former minister. She was a minister for a short period of time. I'd like to keep doing more episodes like that. But the feedback tends to be almost like you're selling yourself out.
Yeah.
That you're being short of October 17's aspirations. I don't buy that stuff.
If between Samir Jaja and Michel Aoun there are these red lines between the two camps that they cannot even talk to each other, I'm not into that kind of political makeup.
Yeah.
Yes, I believe I'm doing my best to be as clear as possible on my own opinions in my own editorial videos that I call rants.
Yes, which are good.
Yeah, I'm trying to be really sharp, not trying to have some round edges. But at the same time, having my own opinion shouldn't restrict any conversation with any other person.
Yep.
Knowing that, yes, I won't do any interview just for the sake of advertising for any political candidate to any political position. I want to have a true discussion.
Yeah.
So let's say now that Riyad Salemi agrees to do an interview with me. Yes, I doubt he won't. I truly have no problem, and if he listens,
same Riyad Salemi or
no, this one. If he listens to this podcast, it's an invitation. Yeah,
I will take that section out.
Yeah,
I'll find a way to get that to him, and this will be the biggest mistake.
Yeah, and I can guarantee.
But I have to leave the country.
And I'll go further. I can guarantee him that I won't try to have any ambush during the interview.
Yeah,
but I'll be frank. I'll be polite. I'll be frank.
You brought him up for, I think, the right reasons right now, it's somebody you would want to talk about, even though you've been openly critical.
Yeah.
Have you ever tried reaching out to his people or him?
Lately, no. But
earlier there was that...
during the Al Jadeed days, I once did an interview with him, but it was about a specific issue. It was a technicality before the collapse.
Yeah.
After that, no. I'll do the job. I'll try. But you should know something, that at my last days at Al Jadeed...
I get credit.
At my last days at Al Jadeed, he had a press conference during 2020. And he was going to declare something about... I can't remember now what, but we were during the 3,900 liras for a dollar or something like that. It was a technicality.
Yeah.
So Mariam Al-Bassam from Al Jadeed, running the news, she asked me if I would go there because I would understand what he's talking about in order to ask him questions. So I told her absolutely. So they put my name and they sent my name to the central bank that this is the reporter that we'll have, because the central bank asks who's the reporter that is coming to the press conference.
And there's a photo of you at the door with
So I had a call late at night that the central bank didn't agree on my name. They asked them to have another reporter. Yeah, I told them fine.
Yeah.
It's your decision to make. It's not mine.
Yeah.
And I didn't make a fuss out of it.
So that was really the last time, at least from support of a station, that you tried.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I saw that they see me as the devil. It's fine. I don't have any problem with that.
It would be like a nice springboard if you start with Fuad Senora and show that you're not trying to ambush them.
Yeah.
That maybe there's that could be a building block towards...
I had a problem. I told you just a couple of minutes ago that I need your advice on something.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Because given your father, and you might know more people from the 14th of March camp during especially the days from 2005, 6 till at least 2008 or 7, 9.
In the old Fuad Senora government, the 2005 2005 until 2007 or so, 8.
Yeah, they had their second government from 8 to 9
Yeah,
before
exactly.
the elections
Yeah.
and after the Doha agreement.
Right.
I have a problem, and I even asked some people from the 14th of March camp. I need someone to do an interview with.
Keep talking, Jad. I'm just going to start reading a book while you. Let's see. تاريخ الليرة أو
You have to change the book.
Let's,
pure nostalgia is better.
We have Patrick Baz here, a whole collection of his photography.
No, I'm facing a real problem because I believe it's a shortcoming of my own, but I'm trying to search for some people from both camps with the label of a public intellectual, not to talk about daily events and daily politics and we need 3 ministers, they gave us 2, and I'm tired of that kind of conversations. From the 14th of March and even from the 8th of March, they have their own problems there, but you can single out maybe 1 or 2. Who is the public intellectual of the 14th of March camp? Not the political players now, but the idea. You had Samir Frangihi back then.
Yes,
he was like the public intellectual. Who is the one that I'm really intrigued in having a true conversation with someone from the 14th of March camp, just to understand how did they conceive dealing with the change in 2005, and what happened, and how do they review that period, but from a sincere standpoint.
Yeah. He's right there.
Yeah, he's right there.
He's right there. So I think you would have, that conversation I think would have been, I would love to have watched that conversation.
Yeah.
Maybe you're having 1% of it with me, but the 99% is right there.
Yeah, but
I think the other ones, I didn't know them well, and they died such a long time ago. But Bassel Fleihan...
Yeah, I heard lots about Bassel Fleihan also.
He was, I think, very, very, very eloquent in his way. On more economics, more finance.
Yeah.
I don't know too much about... I know the literature better than the politics of Samir Asir.
Yeah,
because it's really the last stretch that he becomes more politics oriented. I know him more as a writer, turning into a politician, but I go back usually with Samir Asir. I'm afraid, Jad, I think they're all dead. And I don't know of anyone today who's an intellectual. I'll use that word because you're using it.
In the broad sense.
In the broadest sense, from that era. There are so many people that still claim to speak on behalf of that, but I think many of them are closeted panderers to Hezbollah. That goes back to our earlier conversation. I think many that claim to have supported March 14 and the last stretch, that are still looking to gain power, that were serving in the last stretch. I think a lot of them were not March 14. So I think when they say they are, I don't know if that's true. And they're not necessarily the intellectual crowd that you're asking about. They're more the, you mentioned earlier, the 2 seats here, 3 seats here.
Yeah, the fights, the internal fights in the government, and they are in a fight with Aoun and Aoun.
Yeah, the bigger sort of narrative of March 14. I think it's him, but the others were killed before him, and.
Because I was really trying to do some homework about the main figures of the 14th of March, and there are a few names. I don't want to name them now because I don't want to get personal with anyone, but some of them, yes, they are smart. They know what they are talking about, but they have some hidden agendas and their monetary ties with certain local or regional players, so they can just bend whatever they need to say in order to serve any how to say it, a convenient narrative. So I'm trying not to go there, even though on a personal standpoint yes, they are smart and they can fill that role,
Yeah.
but they don't because they need to play a political role.
And their political role adjusted to something that was not March 14. It was, you mentioned national unity before.
Yeah.
You didn't say national, you said it in a nicer way. This, whatever,
Coalition,
joke. Coalition, yeah. That to me is the end of March 14 already.
Yeah.
So
and that's the end of the 8th of March also.
Actually, yeah.
Because that's my whole point that I keep on repeating. I want to take the arguments of both camps seriously, without being cynical or anything. Okay, so if one camp says that the others are killing us, they are doing assassinations, and the other camp says that those are collaborators with the Israelis during the Harb Tammuz and everything. If that's your true standpoint, how come you are sitting with each other in each and every government, but you are not even considering a dialogue with the opposition, the true opposition?
The current
opposition, because some would say they are managed by Hezbollah and the others say that they are managed by Saudis or the Americans. Okay, but you are sitting with the Saudis and the Americans in the government, and you are sitting with Hezbollah in the government.
So I am going to do something which so this actually, you know what? You told me you're giving me up to 2 hours.
That's fine.
I know you have friends. They're going to have to wait a little. I actually told myself I'm not going to bother Jad Ghosn with anything to ruin a weekend.
Do your best.
Talk about how good his podcast is. Nice jacket.
Thank you. The people who are watching this have seen me in jacket and you're wearing the short sleeves.
I know.
And I'm cold.
And you're cold. Yeah, that's true. All right. So you know what? Let's do the stuff that this is what people I think want to hear because we do it well.
Yeah,
that's the thing. We do it well. I think the way you spelled it out right now is the stuff that I think allows for this constructive disagreement.
Yeah.
I know you said it before, and I know we had that moment before. I don't think there is a March 14 anymore.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think March 14, this is what we talked about in a bit before, was not killed by March 8. It's not Nabih Birri who delegitimized March 14. And it's not one particular group of March 8 that went and said, you know what, March 14 is not winning, they're not persuading, they're off, we're the alternative and we're the rightful opposition. Hezbollah destroyed March 14. Did not destroy the fake intelligentsia of March 14. Did not destroy the members that claimed to be March 14, but served in every fake national unity government. And they left the most important political leaders of March 14. Michel Aoun is one of them, pre-transition. They left Saad Hariri. They left the ones that I think could be persuaded to Hezbollah's terms. And that does not discredit any reasons that they did for pure power. I think they should be scolded regularly for using power as a reason to just say, you know what, we need to constantly compromise our principles. We're doing this for our own very narrow gains. That to me is not March 14. That's Lebanese politics gone wrong.
Yeah.
So borrowing from what you said earlier, I think this dichotomy doesn't exist. I do think that one group that really steers the ship in March 8 found a way to end politics. Politics was already bad. We briefly talked about this earlier. When the Syrians were here, you were protesting them. I remember you said it, which was a nice moment for me. I was trying to describe what they were doing here, and you said it was an occupation.
Yeah.
We both know that. Politics was dying, but 2005, it came back. I think everything that was sacrificed in those years could not withstand Hezbollah. So I'm going to try to do what you want. We can edit this later if you don't like it.
I have no problems, relax.
I want to try to answer at least one of those questions you would like to ask to a March 14 intelligentsia, knowing that I'm a rogue person in a small apartment in Marum Khair with no agenda. Even when it comes to him, I can think for my own. So I'd like to know what I would disagree with him too. But let's go down this road. What are at least one of the questions you'd like to ask?
So my whole issue with the 14th of March, I understand the argument that Hezbollah is an aberration to the usual political systems in the world, because you have the monopoly over armaments. But usually when you want to do politics, you need to have your theoretical diagnostic of what's going on.
Yeah.
And you would need to say that, okay, that's the problem, and that's the way I will solve the problem, and that's why I'm running into government and I'm going into elections, because I'm talking to people and letting them know that vote for me.
Yeah.
Because by voting for me, I'm working towards solving your problem.
Yeah.
Now, Hezbollah doesn't work. The Hezbollah question, from the 14th of March standpoint, doesn't work from that perspective. Yeah, you cannot have 70 MPs and then you would solve the problem of Hezbollah. It's more complex. But you would have to have at least a roadmap.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a long roadmap, but any roadmap for you to be a political entity from a viable standpoint, not from an intellectual standpoint.
Yeah.
Yes, I can hear any academic or any journalist speaker saying that Hezbollah's armament are a problem, and you cannot have a truly functioning political system while having one party out of the many having its own arms.
And it's too simplistic of an answer, because it's just
it's a position. You're giving me your position.
Right.
I understand that position. What was the political program or political view back then for them on how to deal with the Hezbollah question efficiently? Even though I'm not asking for any small victories or any quick victories, you have 6 months and you have. That's not. I know it's a complex issue. I would think that's my own answer, that the state, building the state apparatus, is the argument towards Hezbollah's followers that you have a stake in this country because the state is doing something that you need. And if the state breaks down, you would have a problem.
Yeah.
What they did is the opposite.
March 14.
Yeah, March 14. So they got into government and it's business as usual. No budgets, the same old guard takes الصفقات العمومية المتعهدين and Jihad al-Arab and Ala Khawaja after that, and Ghandour from British side. Now we have Dani Khouri from the Christian side. So it's business as usual, but we are against Hezbollah. So now, as an independent viewer at the, or how to say it, somewhere from the outside looking in, having no stakes by either parties. So I would say, yes, I understand why Hezbollah needs to keep his arms, because it's a political leverage that he has, and he has his own project and political program, and I understand why the others need to let him surrender his arms. But is their argument of him surrendering his armaments is towards the end of having a stronger state, a more efficient state, a better kind of living, or another confessional war between two parties, because one of them has the armaments, but it's not because of out of principle, let's say. It's because we have a confessional balance in Lebanon, and now one of the confessions is breaking that balance. We don't need a better state. We need a fair game between confessions, and that's why their behavior in government wasn't the best behavior for a political party that asking for a stronger state. Al-Ubur ila ad-dawla, that wasn't the dawla.
I will try. I mean, I'll be honest with you, because you're very good at what you do. It's the first time anyone has asked me this question this way. So I'll try.
Yeah.
I may not shine.
You will.
I may. If I faint and just click, and then please upload.
No, you're trying to lower expectations.
That's what I do for a living. The country, lower your expectations.
That's the
Me,
motto.
lower your expectations. Nothing good is happening. I'll try because we're roughly the same age. I mean, we were both young when these things were happening.
Yeah.
Young meaning in our 20s or whatever. We're not. I think we've grown into a very mature reflection now because it's 16 years since those moments began.
Yeah.
So I'll speak as somebody looking back.
Yeah.
With whispers having had someone in my family who had a goal in mind. So I'll try to link this up to what I think of as March 14. My understanding of everything that was at least pushed through in the build-up to what was March 14, 2005 was compromised in June 2005. I think that first government, where you said it business as usual, it really felt like...
Even during the elections, 2000, الحلف الرباعي.
This is what I'm talking... Yeah, exactly. So that way of... You have a chunk of March 14 that believes back then in one figure, Michel Aoun. To have that chunk, I don't think they're all just sheep. I don't like this kind of... People blame everyone in this country for being sheep.
Yeah.
I don't think that's fair.
That's not fair, yeah. I agree.
Thousands of protesters that were on the street of March 14, 2005, were suddenly in March 8. And you have to... There has to be some acknowledgement that there's a mistake made.
Yeah.
You can't just blame Michel Aoun's determination or his personality, which could be off-putting, but that's not enough to take a chunk of the population away from what was theirs. They are March 14.
And that's quite a revealing moment back then, because the 14th of March couldn't handle Michel Aoun, but they could Hezbollah during the elections.
Right. So that, to me, is already what is going on. Something's wrong. Whether or not Michel Aoun returns to Lebanon with assurances, whether or not he's given some private security exchanges with the Syrians as they're leaving, or with Hezbollah, that's a separate story. But I think the point is, the spirit of what was March 14, once Hezbollah was brought back in as if nothing happened, 1 million people demonstrated. Assassinations were happening. We're going to pretend like there's nothing wrong. That's the end of March 14. So my experience is a short-lived moment. But long-term, I think, this is my understanding, is that the few people within March 14 that I think went back to the principles, not the politics. Not the politics of how many people it takes to get Ibn Bashar Khouri to become president versus Samir Jaja or whatever, and getting Sleiman Bil-Akhir. I don't think that's the Lebanese politics that you do when a country is in crisis and you get stuck in the details. I think the few that were proactively working towards at least trying to make sure that the Syrian exit would lead to a sovereign state, they're dead. The ones that stuck their head up and had to deal with Lebanese politics by default. No one's immune to the silliness of Lebanese politics. And it's within, months after those elections in the summer of 2005, Gibran Twaini is killed, Pierre Gemayel today. It's the anniversary, it's 15 years, right? That's in 2006. Remember, it's almost every month at some point there's assassinations. They're all March 14. All of them are hiding in the Phoenicia or wherever they are. Some of them were living in Sarai. If you talk to Fouad Senora, I would love to watch this. If I remember right, he spent nights or weeks living in the Sarai. And if you remember those projectors shining on
during the protest, calling him to step down.
Exactly, end of 2006 and 2007. You get, I think, in a way distracted by what you're there to do. And I think, personally, the biggest example of this is someone like Saad Hariri. There's no other reason why this man is even supposed to be in Lebanese politics, right? He's the son of an assassinated figure. Probably somebody who should have preserved that, whatever you think about Rafiq Hariri. But the Lebanese were willing to at least honor that he was killed that way. You could at least hold on to that and use it as somebody, as a symbolic figure. He threw, I think, a lot of that away when he entered politics. And it shows today where he is and where that story is. But that to me is not March 14, if that makes sense.
It does, because...
And sorry, one more thing. You said something you asked a very sharp question. March 14 and March 8, figures that don't talk to the opposition. October 17. I really don't think anyone in March 14 that's worth their salt is even involved. And March 8, the way I understand it today, is a Hezbollah-oriented defense mechanism against what is a increasingly angry population that is pointing at them more and more than they used to. I think it was one of your rants. I hope I remember this right. I think it was a rant. You kind of let it out a bit. You were talking about where Bitar is and where the investigation is. I think all of us are in that stage now. It's like, this is unacceptable.
Yeah, but the thing that I was trying to say about the 14th of March back then, and now it's the 8th of March, is that I believe we have the same chronic problem in Lebanon decades now. But
you sound like me.
Oh, I do.
We were rubbing off on each other.
Yeah. So the problem is that there is al-Haririya siyasiyya. So during the 90s, it was Rafiq al-Hariri at the forefront. So he was the target of any criticism because he wasn't the political system.
Right.
He was just the tip of the iceberg. But it was Nabih Berri, it was Walid Jumblat, it was Michel Al-Mur, it was Lahoud, Franji.
There was a lot of economics under his wing.
But he was like the forefront of that new era.
Yes.
Before that, it was the Al-Maroniya siyasiyya, the Maronites, because they were at the forefront. Now it's Hezbollah at the forefront, but they all have a common playbook. They all are anti-state political players because they see politics from the lenses of their community, let's say. So the state is just a means to an end. Yes, Rafiq al-Hariri had his own project. One can disagree, one can agree, but he had his own project. But his own project was based on a premise that we have as ex-militias, let's say confessional players, with the newly in the game, let's say financial sector, we have to have an alliance to run the state together. This togetherness is what I hate.
I hate it too, and
because it's a very munafiq. That's a hypocritical approach of trying to hide the real playbook, the real mode of doing politics, which is each confession has its own state within the state. And we need to just not step on each other's toes, which is what is a coalition government.
I agree.
That's it.
The coalition government.
So now Hezbollah is playing that role.
Absolutely. Would you say, though, I assume, that Syria played that role effectively?
Yeah.
All we had was coalition governments.
But at the Syrian days, why some people would say that the Syrian era is even better than what we are living now. That under that, or at least over that, we have a superstructure that is running the show. So you have a centralized center of decision making. It was the Syrians. Yes, you have your own politicking and bickers, but once you need a decision, you can revert to someone who would take any decision, might it be bad or good. Since the Syrian left, we're trying to not step on each other's toes as militias, ex-militias, or confessional parties, or financial clout, let's say. But we don't have anyone to resort to have the final decision. So that's when Hezbollah gets into the game, especially after the 17th of October fiasco, let's say, from the standpoint of the government back then. That now each party is crumbling or having internal problems from the FPM, from Mustaqbal, from Amal. Hezbollah is the only party out of all these parties having more damage control, let's say. And he's saying, I won't use this balance of power leaning towards in favor of my end against you. I will run the show for you and with you.
Right. And that's
Rafiq Saad al-Hariri naming Saad al-Hariri to be prime minister. That's naming Mi'ati.
Oh, yeah.
That's not touching Riyad Salemi effectively.
Yeah.
And that's naming Yusuf Khalil as finance minister.
Sure. Actually, so I completely agree with you, Jad. And I think the tragedy is that dialogue with Hezbollah, serious dialogue, I mean, not dialogue for the sake of dialogue, but dialogue that leads to solutions. The fact that all of those steps were met with either intimidation or violence, I think indicated relatively early on that this group is not doing Lebanon's work, that there's something bigger that they're involved with. And unfortunately, I think Hezbollah would have been, by now, another Lebanese political player without the story of everything else. But the fact is, any group that inherits what the Syrians left behind, that's a big mistake, because the Syrians eventually left. And the Lebanese are a little too upset at the moment to ignore what is happening. And that's a segue to wrap up the episode.
Yeah.
The question I wanted to ask you, because I learned a lot from you. Bring back the safety paper. That's controversy is squiggles. Safety is well manicured. You're doing fantastic work when it comes to just talking about where the port blast investigation is. Obviously, it's not just you. Many independent voices. Some that are run by young, aspiring journalists. Some that are more mainstream. But there's a community of journalists that is doing the dirty digging.
Right.
The government obviously is doing almost nothing, if not anything. And we're learning thanks to journalists just how bad things were when it led to the port blast and why these things are happening, where Tariq Bitar, I think at the moment, hasn't done anything in the last weeks since the recent suspension. Do you see your role today, when at least this issue comes up, at trying to push justice down this regime's throat? Because you're very careful with your words, but you're also very stern, and all of us in different ways lost our patience with this issue. But do you see that as part of your journey, that it's not just expressing what's happening or offering analysis, that you're actually trying to fill in the shoes of what should be really the state's work?
Look, I would be naive to really believe that a systemic problem that we are facing will be resolved through a simple judicial decision, let's say. Let's say in the best case scenario, Tariq Bitar continues his work. And he prosecutes those or investigates each and every single individual that he seems that needs to be investigated. And then the investigation ends, and he will have his decision, which will be then lent to the judicial, the Majlis al-Adli, where there they will have their decision. And let's suppose even a better scenario. They will say Jad Ghosn is the one who was behind the blast. And Jad Ghosn was a part of any political movement in Lebanon, be it Hezbollah, be it Jumblat, be it Franjiyya, be it what do you think then would happen?
Absolutely nothing.
So what I'm trying to do with this whole following up, first of all, I'm doing my job. Okay, I should follow up on this issue and just be frank about all what's happening. It's just to uncover the systemic problem that we have, that it has reached a phase that even an independent investigation, it's not a judicial process that is going to happen later on. We're still in the investigation phase. You cannot even investigate with an ex-minister.
Exactly.
Because the system, usually Hannah Arendt said that those who truly have power don't have to exercise it. Because they are powerful enough for you to know what will happen to you if you try to face that power. So now we are at a stage where an investigator can't even have, let's say, investigation with Hassan Diab, let's say. And Hassan Diab knows that if he goes to Tariq Bitar, no one would handcuff him.
Right.
No one would put him in prison. We all know that.
Yeah.
But that's not even allowed. And I said during one of those rounds, that when Mi'at's government was put in place, it was an announcement for me that this whole investigation would be thrown into the garbage can. Yeah.
But I mean, in your limited role, but also effective at least getting the audience to understand what's going on, is that bigger pursuit there? Are you trying to at least try to find a way to get the regime to do something different? Because I get frustrated on my own side, where you can just repeat yourself over and over and over. Who cares if there's an audience or not? It doesn't go anywhere. Yeah. There's a frustrated audience.
I always have this ups and downs with my motivational status, if I'm motivated or not. But in this specific case, it's not only having the message come across the audience, because it's the more important issue. If you are being heard, if there are some ripple effects, but it's also landing any support to other judges.
Right.
To rebel.
I see. Yes.
Because you won't be alone. That's the Liverpool motto. You'll never walk alone in the sun.
So you're offering that like echo to Tariq Bitar, that there's an audience that believes in what you're doing.
Yeah, and I had a discussion with one of the NGOs, let's say. It was about a feminist issue. They defend feminist issues. I have this problem in Lebanon that maybe since the October 17th movement can be fixed, and it's being fixed maybe, that the feminist movement should defend the issues of the Ittihad Ammal al-Aam, the labor sector, and the labor sector should defend the rights of the LGBTQ. And us as a society should try to defend the true judges. Because we are trying to build connections that are really effective in positions of power to affect this whole machine and how it works. If Tariq Bitar, even though he, let's say, and I always say, I will defend Tariq Bitar until proven wrong. Once he really does something that you have any evidence about it, I'll be the first one to be in his opposition, let's say.
But I like the way you framed it.
But we have to create networks that empower each other, especially those in positions of power. And maybe all of us have been did the mistake of generalizing that everything is corrupted. Every minister that passed, no, not every minister was corrupted. It's not true. Not everyone in the Lebanese administration is corrupted. Having this differentiation is the key to have efficient change.
I fully agree with you. My last column for Now Lebanon, I wrote that exact sentiment, that you have to reward people that are trying. You can't just condemn them for being in the government. If they're doing the right thing, or if they appear to be doing the right thing, have the population stand up and applaud them, because they don't have any allies.
And be realistic in your opposition and your loyalties. Because when you applaud something good, you are not asking to have saints in Lebanon. There's a human being that can make mistakes, but he's doing a good job here, and I can applaud that.
There's something I wanted to ask you earlier, but it ties into October 17. I have limited expectations. I think all of us do when it comes to what's going to happen next year and how many October 17, pure October 17, not Kataib, not the independents that ran before.
Michel Mawad, Namat Frame.
Not the usual crowd that runs.
Yeah, just think of the headlines if they had one coalition, let's say, and that I believe that won't happen. But if they had one coalition, and it's Sami Jmail, it's Namat Frame, and Michel Mawad who won, and that's the title of Sabatash. That's funny.
But I mean, it could happen.
Yeah.
But let's say, them aside, whether they think of themselves as October 17, forget that. Whether October 17 thinks of them as October 17, that aside, the pure October 17 crowd, people that were not in power before, that are in new political parties, that are now going to start running, they may not do that well in the end. Maybe they will have only a handful of seats. Who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe it's too early still. But it doesn't seem like it's going to be a big victory. Be small. Is there any maneuvering space today for those people, knowing everything you said earlier, that, I mean, the problems are old, the regime seems to be more or less intact, and these people are trying to now sort of come in with aspirations, but it's not a new government, it's not a new country, it's not a brand new anything. It's Lebanon. They're entering the state. Do you think they will have some chance at actually improving anything? And I'll add to this question. Let's use an example. He's not October 17, but there's a current Minister of Environment, Nasser Yassin. To me, seemed like he was supporting October 17, at least the aspirations. He met with many October 17 parties. He's currently in the government. We had those giant fires across the country. It seems like he's trying. I don't think he's hiding away from his responsibilities. But the fact is, the equipment is not there. Corruption is so rampant in this country. You could put anybody in that position. They may not be able to do that much.
Yeah. And that's why I'm in opposition with Nasser Yassin's decision to get into this government.
Okay.
Because, yes, if you run to the parliament, to the elections, it's okay. You are positioning yourself in the opposition, and then you'll see what you can do in the parliament. But in the transitional period where the destiny of this country is being forged each and every day, especially from a financial and economic standpoint, and the government will now go and begin its negotiations with the IMF. What are you doing by getting into such a government specifically, where the balance of power is shifted like 99.9% towards the banking sector and the central bank's view on how to resolve this problem? And this was said and declared publicly by Mi'ati himself. And yesterday we watched Riyad Salami. And so you will be blamed for all the wrongdoings. And if you have any small victory which would not affect our situation as a whole in Lebanon, the reward is to the government.
Does that also include, so you made, Nasser Yassin is the current expression of that, March or May next year. So October 17 MP.
Yeah.
Is that person in the same situation as Nasser Yassin? And if they're not, can they do anything?
Yeah. Now the question is, and let's say in 2018, some people who were running to the elections as Kulluna Watani back then were having some fights between each other before they declared their running to the elections. They were having meetings between each other, and they had a political paper to write as a declaration of their unified lists to the elections. So they had their problems back then, because you should write something about, let's say, anything related to the income of the poor people. No, it would be too lefty. No, it would be too to the right. So my standpoint back then, I spoke to one of them. I was telling him, just forget about that. No, it wasn't Gilbert. But I was telling him, just forget about that paper. Why are you having so much time wasted on drafting the small words? yes, we know that you are not really unified politically speaking. What is unifying you at the moment is your opposition. That's it. We all know you are not really unified politically. The opposition is what unified you. And we know you are in disagreement on many issues. You can't hide it. We all know it. People who will vote know this.
Yeah.
In real life, the ones who will win out of this block would have the opportunity and the chance to forge a more unified, a political platform, let's say, or a program, by having the balance of power tilted towards them, because they won the election. They would have the platform, they would have the visibility, and they may affect that political stance of the opposition. And then some people would agree or not. So let's wait for the elections results. And then what happened? You had Paula Yaoubian, let's say, in Beirut, and maybe Osama Saad, for those who would say that Osama Saad is. What work have been done since 2008 and before 2019 and October in order to forge a political front, not just individuals who would just have their political CV on one premise that I'm better than those crooked in the government. It's easy to be better than those. That's not a big issue. Nothing has been done. So now the question is, what does it mean for a true October 17 MP? Who is the true October 17? No one knows. So maybe the election can help us. Let's say that.
That's well said. But give them, let's say there's 5 people from several groups that are only October 17. Lihaqi, let's say, somehow manages to get somebody. Min Tashrin has somebody, I don't know. Kitli al-Watani gets somebody.
Muwatinun and Pola. And Marsad. So these are the base.
There you go. So 5, 6, 7. Okay. These individuals, I think of their job as years and years ahead, not now.
I totally agree.
Yeah. So it's not. There should be very little expectation next year from what they can do.
First of all, the expectation should be lower towards the results of the elections. Especially, I was willing on having a rant about it yesterday, but I had an interview with MP Khayber, so it was delayed.
And then you had internet delays.
Because,
the delays. There you go.
So the immigration vote results would be shocking to those who think they would have a revolution. And the election as a whole. And then if you had specific individuals in the parliament, our problem is that we are still in the 101 class. We didn't go into the real major of doing politics. If you want to do real politics, you would have to assume and give that person some margin to put their hands in the dirt. You cannot do politics from a Puritan standpoint. Yes, any political party and any political individual needs to have dialogue with those that we hate, because they will be in a position of power. The issue is, can we have someone credible enough for us to trust that the kind of discussion that they will have is not power sharing discussions? It's really about policy making. So I believe I had an interview with Ghassan Khayber, who wasn't he didn't get into the scene with the October 17th. He was an MP since 2002. And he is the traditional form of the musharra, the legislator. Yes, he didn't have the big wins, and they didn't manage to make big changes in the country. But the work that he did as an individual in the parliament, by talking to the FPM, by talking to the Mustaqbal sometimes, by talking to the Uwaid sometimes, is trying to do those small marginal changes. If you want something bigger than that, then you would have to make a bigger political front. You cannot expect from 5% of the voters to rule the country. That's not realistic. So then you would have to look internally. What is and what was the problem of this opposition group? And I believe the main problem are 2 points. The one that you touched on a little while ago, the Puritan sense of one has to just look good all the time
Yeah.
and not speak about the controversial issues because that might affect me in a bad way. So that's a problem. And the second is the opportunist in these groups.
Yeah.
I cannot fathom the idea that after, let's say you have any movement group of about 50 people in 2015 during the You Stink movement.
Yeah.
And after 5 years, you're still 50 people.
Right.
Yeah. And a revolution happened and 2 elections happened.
Yeah.
How come such small groups don't ask themselves the question, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Let's empower the closest groups to our thinking and just merge.
Yeah.
And if I had a group and I'm closer to, let's say, Paula Yaoubyan,
Yeah.
I would go to Paula Yaoubyan. We are not able to grow during the last 5 years to the extent that we needed, but we are trying to help. And you are the closest to our mode of thinking. That can be Muwatinun, that can be Muntashirin, whomever.
Yeah.
But just having 300 groups in a small country such as Lebanon, and
Makes no sense.
it makes no sense. So why are you still having this armor and this?
Yeah.
And we are a group.
You know, this even goes back, just to circle
Yeah.
a bit. I think that in itself was March 14's biggest problem,
Yeah.
that it didn't eliminate those parties
Yeah.
and become something better. That it's stuck on to the older parties that are now cursed at all the time.
And one has to talk about horrible issues, but we are talking about real politics here. I'm
Yeah.
not talking about war, but war is an example. So Bashir Jmail, in his ascendance to power,
You want to end the episode with Bashir Ismail. You have to give me 3 more minutes now.
take your time. So it's not only Bashir Jmail, I will go around the circle.
Yeah.
So Bashir Jmail, in order for him to have any efficiency, needed in a very bad way, and I'm not condoning that. But during the war, he just washed off all the other smaller parties.
Yeah.
Hezbollah in the south.
Yeah.
Even Rafiq Hariri during the peaceful times, he was trying to how to say يدوب, just
Melt.
to have the smaller factions in the Sunnis in Beirut specifically, the families of Islam, to merge them into his political movement.
Yeah.
Because if Rafiq Hariri dealt with each and every family as a political entity, he would be serving their existence as a political power.
Right.
He couldn't manage a larger group in order to empower him politically, in order to have any efficiency. So one would have to take a look at this opposition landscape, and you would see 300 groups. What are we doing here? What are we trying to do?
Some of them are parties with only one person.
Yeah. So these need to be discredited at least if they keep on doing politics from a personal gratification point of view.
You know what's really interesting though? We're in 2021. It's obvious that is a big problem, yet nothing is done to reverse it.
Yeah.
Which means there may be something much bigger at play, which is the Lebanese story in itself, I think, is still with us.
Yeah.
And this is maybe something that's existential in this country. The names you just mentioned logically should all be together in one group.
Yeah.
And then you think about the reasons that they're not, and they become very Lebanese reasons. They're not universal reasons. It's certain families, certain confessions.
Yeah.
And then the story kind of stops.
And there should be we should have a line being drawn.
Yeah.
Yes, I don't want to change the planet. I just want to affect our small country.
Right.
So I'm not trying to ask for something like some people. They are against any personification of politics.
Yes.
They
Yeah.
just try to.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that we can't go that far.
Yeah.
Because even in the United States, even in Europe, even in France, even in UK, yes, we have the figure of Boris Johnson. You have to have figure of Macron or Marine Le Pen, Bernie Sanders or Trump or. But I can handle some of the bad stuff. But at least politically speaking, be clear and have 2 to 3 to 4 camps. I can handle 4 camps.
Especially in a small place.
In a small place.
You know, I know that people often accuse both of us for things that are not true. Not often, sometimes, I'll be fair. هيدا مستقبل.
Yeah.
like I don't have any membership. ما مستقبل. Like no.
And
أنت منفذ.
Yeah, أنا منفذ.
Yeah. But I don't think you are an actual member of that party.
But I have declared my sympathy to their political program.
Right, but you're not like a card carrying.
No.
Do you pay the 10% annual fee?
No, I don't.
Okay.
But the issue is that during the beginning of 2020, or it was during the demonstrations, late 19 or I made a couple of videos asking all of the political groups that are emerging now, just to change and to break with the way that politics has been done from the political parties that we know. Have your own political program.
Yeah.
Clearly defined political program. And it's not just an aesthetically needed political program to just look modern or whatever. It's the basis for you to be able to have allies.
Yeah.
That then you can measure where you are closer to a group or to another. If you don't do this job, how can we judge you, and how can you judge yourself politically on the landscape? Where do I fit?
Sure.
So that would make any coalition even harder in the future.
Yeah.
And that's where, when I said that مواطنون and مواطنات did their job. So now when they have their program, give us your position to that program. If you are far away, if you are close, and let's have 2 to 3 camps.
Yeah.
And then the opposition can be organized to a certain extent, and we can have dialogue, fruitful dialogue between these 2-3 camps. Yeah. If we are 300 groups, we cannot even have a dialogue now.
No, it ends. It ends in chaos.
And it ended.
But I'll say something. This is an assumption. I don't mind talking about the parties and what they're good at. Forget all their flaws, but if a party is trying to reform and they make decisions that are in that direction, you can talk about it, saying there's reform tendencies within that party. Doesn't mean they're angels or that they're even going to win. I was thinking when you were talking about the old ways of mustaqbal. Not this. Let's go back to Rafiq Hariri days, maybe the earlier moments when we were kids. Something that used to appeal to me as somebody who was too young to even care is that there was a group that seemed to be reaching out to varied communities, and that they would sometimes make it less Sunni as a policy, not because they're trying to pander, but that they're trying to actually bring in brighter people. So somebody like Basel Fleihan, for example, that he was in Mustaqbal, to me is something positive.
What's interesting in the Mustaqbal movement's ascendance during Rafiq Hariri days, that you can pinpoint the moments when Hariri reverted to Sunniism.
Right.
Because at the beginning, he was a state project. He had a state project. When this state project began collapsing or having difficult moments, let's say since 1996, 1997, 1998, he reverted to Sunnism to just have a defensive mechanism because the plan wasn't going as planned. But
back in the days, Emil Lahoud coming into power, it's a long time ago. But that thing, you can criticize Mustaqbal for everything all the time, but I like that kind of not being so tied into your own community. Whatever you think about Mumthid or Sharb al-Nahas, people like to talk about this group as if it's the biggest story in Lebanon, and it's not. It's just a guy with a platform and a following. It's a big following, but it's not as dramatic, I think, as people make it out to be. But that they are very good at reaching out. I see Mumthid gatherings in Beirut. I see them in Beirut. I see them sometimes in the south. And it's clear that this is not a confessional project. I like that. It appeals to me.
But that's the basic way to do politics, especially for emerging parties. So my question was...
I just wish he was less sensitive when it came to Hezbollah.
I heard this criticism, but I saw him many times talking about Hezbollah, and Hezbollah is a problem to be solved. The question is how to solve Hezbollah. So we are evolving towards the problem. And what intrigued me in that program when I read the program is that dealing with the Hezbollah question is also embedded in the economic and financial program. So yes, we have a problem. We need to fix the many reasons that made this problem emerge in the first place. Because one, at the same time, and here I have a problem with many people, that yes, one can be critical with Hezbollah on lots of issues, but one has to keep in mind that Hezbollah's legitimacy isn't also brainwashing and buying people.
Sure.
Yes, he did something that others couldn't do, especially for those living in the south. Now, how can we deal with this issue knowing that this legitimacy exists in real life?
Yeah.
So it's like when during the Syrian days, it's not enough just to say to someone that I'm against the Syrian president of Lebanon.
Right.
So let's see what the Syrians are doing, and let's try to deal with those problems, trying to affect them. Yeah. It's not just giving out the position.
That's true.
Yeah.
I just don't want anyone who has ambition, and he seems to be a very intelligent person. I don't know him. You know him probably more than many do. He seems to be very well informed and very sharp. He may also have dictatorial tendencies. I don't know. No, I'm joking. I'm joking.
I also heard that a lot.
Yeah, these are just whispers.
I can't give any definitive opinion about that because my relationship with him is an individualistic relationship.
Yeah.
So
let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Yeah. Let's say that he's just very principled to the point of maybe there's a stubbornness there. Yeah. But I don't want anyone with that goal in mind, trying to fix the country, to ever go back to what Michel Aoun ended up doing. There's no reason to go back. Going from being this revered leader who many Lebanese sought to as an exiled leader, return to this country, sink with Hezbollah, to the point that now he's so far removed from what I remember as Michel Aoun. What made me sympathetic to that party too.
Yeah, but that's why my whole focus was back then when talking to Lihaqi, when talking to Mentishrin even, some people that they are sympathetic to those. Yeah. You should also have your political detailed program, not those we need an independent country. These are bullshit. We all need a really policy-based political program for you to be able to render your leaders or your MPs in the future accountable to something. Mm-hmm. Because if you take a look at our traditional political parties, they intentionally don't have clearly detailed policy papers.
Yeah, that's true.
Because they want towards their constituency to have the broader margin possible when doing politics. And your interest is to render their margin as thin as possible. And the political program is one of those tools to make that person accountable to what he says.
I will give credit to Mumfid that they have very detailed policies. Mentishrin is young. Yeah. They're very ambitious, but they're young and they're small. But they've done
what I've heard, they are doing some effort towards that end.
Fantastic.
And even Lihaqi, they tried to do a paper.
So at least the new crowd, if you want to include Shab al-Nahas, even though he's part of the old, but whatever, at least they're finally getting their act together when it comes to that issue.
And I believe, I hope at least, no one knows, when you have 3 to 4 to 5 parties with clearly defined political objectives and policy papers, they should be able to talk to each other.
Yep,
at least
absolutely.
On the policy side of the story, they should have something in common. Maybe in the long-term objectives they can go separate ways, but for an opposition group to be very far away from a policy standpoint from another, that would be really weird.
It would be weird, and I hope the direction long-term is what I think both of us want at the end of the day, is to live the last years of our lives knowing that things are moving in the right direction. I don't think we will both live in a fully functioning Lebanon, but if we live long enough,
if I stop smoking and I have a longer span,
100% quit smoking. So Jad, many people have been begging me to have you on the podcast. I told them when it's time, it'll happen. So finally, it's happened.
Thank you for that. I'm really honored to be here, and I really enjoyed these 2 hours.
They're a thrill for me. I didn't even realize it was 2 hours. We're past 2 hours. Thank you for what you do.
And excuse me for my English, I'm doing my best if I lost
أنا
some
لازم
words.
أعتذر لأن أنا ولا مرة جربت كمل جملة على البودكاست بالعربي شي يوم إذا حطوني على مرسال غانم أو ألبير كوستانيان أو whoever دي مصادر.
Yeah, I love the way that you say Costanyan because
that's
the
not
true
correct.
way to spell it is Costanyan.
Oh,
So in Lebanon, because it's Costagnon, it's more
Costagnon.
Frenchy.
So,
Yeah.
Costagnon.
No, it's Costagnon. You said it right the first time.
ألبير كوستانيان. I think إذا أنا جربت عن جد أحكي إذا قلت شو عم بقول أنا بالعربي, two things will happen. The audience will go down and I'll be thrown into some show on MTV only. So I prefer...
I agree on the second point, not the first.
Oh, okay. Well, regardless, I know that you love doing this more than your old gig because the passion shows in your episodes.
Yeah, I truly do.
And there's nothing that I would ever do to stop this. So on that note, Jad, thank you.
Thank you very much.